Dear listeners, like that feeling when you think you have dealt with something, moved past it, processed it, only to have it show up again in a different form. Maybe I'd say it's the same argument with a different person, the same tension in your body when certain things happen, the same loop you thought you did broken, right? Trauma doesn't announce itself with the clarity. It whispers through the patterns that we barely notice until we are, I mean, standing in the middle of them again, right? So, welcome back to another powerful episode of Mind Meets Machine. I'm your host, Avik, and this is a space where we slow down enough to notice what's actually happening beneath the surface of our lives, our minds, the systems that we build, and the ones that build us. And today I'm joined by a very lovely guest. Please welcome Jacob Modak. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. So it's lovely to be here and share and just talk about mind meets machine, nirvana meets samsara, and the interrelation between the two and all the rest of it. So yeah, I love the title. I'm already getting a bit like my sort of metaphorical, philosophical thoughts are bouncing around as a result of it.
Exactly. I'm really happy that you are here today. And before we get into the discussion, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all the listeners. So, the listeners, like Jacob is a holistic health practitioner trained by and part of the Czech Institute, CHEK, and the founder of the Trauma Healed online coaching program, and someone who describes himself simply as a person who has walked through his own healing journey and come through it, right? So I do not want to take much of your time, dear listeners. Let's get started. So, Jacob, there's this idea that the trauma is something which is very dramatic, something obvious, something that only happens to certain people in certain situations. So, on that perspective, what's the most common misconception that you feel that you run into about what trauma actually is?
Well, the first thing I would say is it's kind of got this sort of ethereal connotation. Like I haven't heard a lot of people really try and sort of define it in a way that makes sense. And the reason why I bring that up is because for any issue that one is trying to address, from trying to rewire an electrical appliance to fixing a car tire to human health or whatever, if we don't actually know we don't know what the issue actually is, and we can actually understand it and define it to a degree, well, then we don't actually know what kind of tools we'll need to actually address it because we don't know its nature. So the first thing in terms of like misconception, I wouldn't even say it's a misconception, is like I haven't really heard people fully understand it from what I've seen, which I don't say judgmentally, because especially things that are intangible, it's just harder because they don't have like an objective form. Now, the medical system can use that word trauma in a very tangible sense, like someone breaks their arm and then a doctor could say there's trauma to the surrounding tissues of the original injury point, or whatever terminology they would use. But for this context, talking about the intangible aspects, the first thing is to actually know what you're dealing with. And from that, I would say that it's understanding that, to quote Dr. Keith Witt, who's an integral psychotherapist, someone who I study a lot.
Okay.
He's also one of Paul Chek's friends, Paul Chek, the founder of the Czech Institute. But Dr. Keith Witt says trauma essentially is a form of memory. So what that essentially means is it's a painful memory that has not been fully brought in consciously and understood and loved, and a coherent narrative created through it. And when I was asking myself, like, what actually is trauma? Oftentimes the answer is actually hidden in the word. So trauma as an acronym, as I understand it, this is what I came up with, stands for to reject an unpleasant memory assertively. So what that means is there's the memory, because as it being a form of memory, is being held away assertively from consciousness. And the degree to which something's held away and not brought into consciousness, it still holds its charge and remains not understood. And the degree to which a memory remains not understood is the degree to which it still can be distressing. So an analogy that I use for this is if you have a young child and they burn their finger cooking for the first time, their reaction could be quite extreme.
Exactly.
Like they don't understand what's going on. They've never understood it before. They don't know if their finger's going to fall off. They don't know if they're going to die. They're like, oh my God, this hurts so much. What's going on? But then the mum comes along and is like, what happened? What happened? My finger, my finger. Okay, you burnt your finger. Is my finger going to fall off? Am I going to die? No, your finger's not going to fall off. You're not going to die.
Yeah.
That thing gets hot. You need to be aware of that. We're going to run it under some cold water. It will be sore for a few days. I'll kiss it better. I'll give you a cuddle. We'll put some cream on it. You'll be okay.
Mm.
If that mother burns their finger in exactly the same way, their reaction's not going to be the same. So what principle do we see here? It's the level of comprehension that one has of that particular incident. How did it happen? What does it mean for me? How do I deal with it? What does it mean for me afterwards? What awareness do I have afterwards? What lesson did I learn? All of those things the mother has full comprehension of, but the child doesn't. The degree to which those things are not understood is the degree to which that memory stays charged. Now, that principle applies for everything, and it's not to diminish or trivialize the sheer intense challenge of certain traumatic experiences, such as abuse to various degrees, or take your pick of something horrible that someone goes through. But that principle fully applies. So essentially, trauma at its core, and this is half of the definition, is a form of memory that's not fully brought in consciously and understood fully through that whole thing and brought to a resolution of this is the lesson I learned and this is how I can bring it forward in my own life and share with the world. So that's the first part. And then the second part, which gets a little bit more towards the touching more on nirvana, is trauma essentially is not the truth of who we are. Trauma essentially is the embodied residue on the outside of the truth of who we are. So that's a misconception that I do see tangibly, is people defining themselves by what happened. And so the analogy for that is if you imagine a beautiful statue, and for some people they instantly think of Michelangelo's David or another statue from the Renaissance, just something just utterly timeless in how magnificent a work of art it is. Now, if you imagine that statue and you just cover it with mud, you just keep covering it more and more and more and more and more and more, even to the point where you can't see any of that statue anymore. All you see is mud. And then I asked the question, does it stop being a beautiful statue at its core? The answer to that is no. And then the question from that is, what is the truth of who we are? The truth of who we are is we are a unique soul here. We are a soul standing for source of unconditional love, as Carl Jung described it. Each soul is each person's unique and individual and individuated aspect of God, source, the divine, take your pick, the Tao, whichever terminology you want to use. And a lot of the times, if that aspect, that more nirvanic aspect of the truth of who we are is not interwoven into the trauma healing process, it's a lot easier and seamless for the ego to start defining itself by the residue on the outside, like someone experienced abuse, or I am now this broken person, I am this, I am that, da da da. Their ego is just seeing the residue on the outside. And that is when that's the only time the ego will ever feel constricted, no matter what happens. And so when that truth is fully anchored in, the ego, regardless of what happens, when it really anchors to that soulful truth and knows that it's there. And again, I'm being quite general, and there's lots of nuances interwoven into this as well. Regardless of what happens, it will never feel hopeless, because it will tangibly feel that loving truth. So that would be a misconception. Defining themselves as what happened and feeling as a result of that suboptimal false definition, thinking that I am forever like this, so I'll never be free of it. So all I can do is manage it, and thinking that it's hopeless. So that's a misconception, that it's hopeless and that I am forever stained by this. That is a lie. It just comes from just sometimes the ego just not knowing that beautiful statue exists because it's never seen it before. And what I mean by that is there's always a moment where one's brain has matured to a level where they're able to be self-conscious of themselves, usually around 13, 14. But sometimes all of this trauma happens way before that age. So way before their brain has even developed the cognitive neurobiological capacity to have a thought of, is this even true? And so they have to, that memory has to be a traumatic one, because it has to get pushed away, because their brain can't even go through the process. And so all of that mud is on the outside of their beautiful statue. And the first time that they're aware of themselves and able to actually look in the mirror and see themselves, all they see is mud. So they think that mud's the only thing that exists. And so they've never actually seen the beautiful statue. So they don't even know to look for it. And then that's when someone such as myself or another, there's so many other wonderful, special, beautiful beings doing this similar kind of work, that offering those suboptimal, those different perspectives to talk to that person, and them saying like, this happened to me and forever like this, it's just this, it's hopeless, da da da. And then someone like me or another person just being like, I understand, but it's not true, and I'll tell you why. And then they just get a different perspective, and then they're able to actually say, that's actually there, and they can actually start looking for it as well. So yeah, that would be slightly long-winded for your initial question, but that would be a main misconception, that this is just who I am now. It's hopeless. I'm forever like this, and I can only just manage it, and I'll never go over it.
Wow, I'd say that's amazing. I mean, thank you so much for sharing in more detailed way. It is really interesting, like how we have been taught to measure suffering by the kind of comparison, as if like
Suffering and pain are two different things.
yeah.
Suffering, as Ken Wilber defines it,
Hmm.
The founder of integral theory, suffering equals pain plus avoidance.
Okay.
So if something painful comes up and you avoid it, you're going to suffer. So by that, you can choose to not avoid it and you won't suffer. Pain's coming one way or another, but pain as an acronym stands for prompting attention in the now. So as one of my teachers said, it's like a finger prodding you in the present moment to be aware of something. So if you don't avoid that, you can actually grow really quickly.
Okay.
But if people aren't aware of that, then they can get caught on that hamster wheel of suffering, and the ego identifying itself with the residue on the outside does cause that hamster wheel of suffering, because they're avoiding it. Again, not saying this judgmentally. Sometimes people they haven't been exposed to this perspective that that's a possibility for them to even think about. So full compassion for that. I'm not saying this judgmentally in any way, shape, or form. I'm saying this in a encouraging way. Like it doesn't have to be like that. And so, no, I'm not shaming anybody or saying anybody's wrong if they find themselves in that place, because I've 100% been there before. That's how I came about, understood this stuff. I was there and I was like, oh my God, what's going on? How do I deal with this? And then I came across the answers eventually. Yeah, people really can get caught in that. But when the ego just identifies with the residue, that's when that suffering feeling comes in, because there's that avoidance there. There's the pain, but there's the avoidance, because they're not getting to the root of it. And then that's what keeps them on that kind of hamster wheel. And then that's when they feel like there's whatever they do is not working or something like that.
I agree. And it's really amazing. But I also love to ask you, from our daily life, I mean, everyday part, what does the unresolved trauma actually look like when someone's just moving through their day? Not in a kind of therapy session, not in a kind of crisis also, but just existing. So what do you say?
It definitely depends on what the sort of traumatic experience was, because depending on what it was will generally influence which areas it comes up in.
Okay.
And I can give some specific examples if you want, but to speak fairly generally, what the main thing I'll say is it's whatever traumatic experiences someone has had, that will shape their perceptions of something. And one's perception of something will influence how they respond to something that their brain their mind determines. Oh, I've seen that before. That means this is coming. So to stop that from happening, I'm going to do this. So we can say triggers or this or that, but essentially it informs one's perception, and one's perception informs one's reactions and responses and behaviors, even if they're suboptimal. They can only, whatever someone's entrenched perception is will inform their behavior. So if they're not aware of it, like if it's unconscious, like what's unconscious can't be controlled. If that root perception is still unconscious, they won't be able to control their their reaction to something. So here's a simple example that's not like too intense. Like let's say a young a young woman maybe didn't get the kind of male attention she needed from her father, and so she developed a suboptimal, like maybe the father left when she was 10 or something. She grows up, etc., but this is still unconscious, but there's that sort of traumatic wound there still of dad abandoned me. So unconsciously that can translate as men are inherently untrustworthy and I can only rely on myself. So even though as they're getting older, even though the drive to be in relationships will still be there, if she meets a man who's genuinely like open and ready to commit and is quite stable, sometimes she can unconsciously, oh, this guy's really, like, on paper he's really good, but I'm not attracted to him, because unconsciously she's still wired to the chaos.
Right.
And so she still confuses chaos for attraction. So she can reject a good partner because her nervous system is still wired to the chaos. And or sometimes it gets to a certain point where things are getting close and she's now at a place where she has to open her heart. But because unconsciously she thinks all men are just going to leave anyway, she'll leave before she gets hurt. So she'll just ditch that one, even though it was going good. But that's her way of protecting herself unconsciously. And then she's like, I don't know why. And if it's unconscious, you don't know why. Again, it's a very general example because it's hard to say specifically, but the main principle I'm trying to highlight is a traumatic experience will influence a perception of something. And also within that, you can have like, okay, well, he left, so that means that I'm not worthy, so I don't actually deserve someone staying. So even if they want to stay, they're lying and I don't believe them. So you're lying to me, so I'm just going to leave anyway. So their unconscious perception of themselves is I don't deserve the love that this person wants to give to me, so I'm just not going to accept it anyway. And then but they want the love, so they're upset that they don't have it, but unconsciously they're pushing someone away who wants to share it with them because they haven't actually been able to feel like they deserve it. So it's the unconscious perception will influence how they react to certain things. So kind of like software code. It's written in a certain way, and if it's written in a certain way, it can't help but cause a certain reaction of other code coming after it. So that's how it kind of shows up in the day-to-day, in our daily actions and behaviors. So the way I'd describe it is, and it's kind of like a chain reaction, self-perception will influence self-articulation, how we speak about ourselves, and that also cascades and influences our daily actions and what we do. And we also need those to be in alignment for energy to feel like it's flowing through us in a harmonious way. But we can have that alignment at any stage of consciousness, which is also why you can have really unhealthy, horrible people looking like they're flowing through life pretty well, because how they're talking about themselves and their daily actions completely line up with how they view themselves as well. This is also why you can have people that are in and out of like really horrendous relationships and just they're clearly a mess. But the way that they're talking about themselves and their daily actions and how they view themselves, that's all literally aligned and they're not even trying to change it.
Yep.
Because it's just completely entrenched. Whereas you can have the people that really are kind of like caught in that kind of suffering hamster wheel is when those are not aligned. Like maybe they're talking about, they're into this stuff, they're trying to study, they're talking about themselves in certain ways, or they're trying different actions and stuff, but it's not shifting. It's because but their self-perception is still back where it was, even though they're talking about themselves and trying to do better things, but it's not working. They feel like they're going one step forward, two steps back and stuff. That's where you get the people that kind of feel like they're caught on that wheel, which is actually more progress than what I mentioned before, because they're actually in the process of changing it, but they just need to get into that self-perception because that's the root of it. That's the root domino that cascades all the way down into the daily actions and the tangible behaviors that get then wired into the nervous system, which become tangibly physiologically habituated. Because as the law of facilitation states, like any impulse that traverses a set of neurons to the exclusion of others will do so far easier on subsequent occasions. So what that means is the self-perception we have, which translates into our behaviors. The more we do that behavior as a result of our self-perception, the more that wires into the nervous system and the more habituated that gets in. And so that's also why, like in the whole trauma healing process, the bit that I talked about first with the statue is the waking up aspect. But then phase 2 is about how, once we've woken up and done that mental emotional work, how do we clean that sludge out and then anchor it in and create new habits? So tangibly, our nervous system is now in a new habit, and that's where the rubber hits the road, because that can take a while.
I mean, that's where it hides. I mean, in the kind of normalized discomfort, the things that we have told ourselves are just a part of who we are. I mean, the body keeps such detailed records.
And in that phase 2, as you're doing the repetitions of these new habits of, like, for example, that example of the woman, and I could have used the example of a man who, like, let's say, got beat up by bullies at school, and whenever he's walking down the street and sees like a group of guys with hoods or something, gets just really scared and all the rest of it. Like, there could be any kind of example, but like, just to keep with that example, let's say the woman's like going in and like, oh, he left, but that doesn't mean that I'm worth less. So now new dating situation, and good, healthy guy who actually cares about the feminine and wants to support, and she gets to that point, oh shit, I got to open my heart. What if he's going to leave? Or do I even deserve this? Is he too good for me? And then she's like, right, I know that. That's from before. Okay, all right. What am I going to do? Oh, okay, I do deserve this. Okay, I'm going to communicate. I'm scared, but okay, first, I'm not going to run away. I don't know what else I'm going to do, but at least I'm not going to do that. Okay. And so you're now starting to rewire it, but you need repetitions. And as you're doing that, a lot of that kind of emotional intensity can start to come out. Like, sometimes, and it can come out in various ways, and it's interrelated with other things too. Like, as these emotional patterns get released, like muscle fibers start to relax and tension starts to come out and organ systems start to detoxify. And so there's like a physiological purge that can come through in phase 2 as well. So it's like a big old cascade that can happen, more or less, depending on the intensity of what someone has been dealing with, or how tightly they've been resisting something.
Okay.
But yeah, it's that whole holistic picture. Like, the root is in that self-perception, so we need intangible tools to get in there, but then we need to integrate that with the physiological tools as well to anchor it in. So it's not about one or the other, it's about all of them, but at the right time and in the right order, and understanding their hierarchical relationship as well. Because if you just go into, say, the physiological stuff with, say, breath work and trying good habits, but you haven't got to the self-perception bit, it'll keep going back always. Or if you just do the self-perception bit, but you don't actually tangibly integrate it into new habits, you'll keep feeling like your body's fighting you. And it won't feel like you are actually a new person. So you need both, but you need them in the right order.
I agree. So, I mean, if you have to give any advice to the listeners today, what that will be?
We'll be right back.
Are you pregnant or recently postpartum and struggling with substance use? Or do you know someone who is?
You're not alone. I'm Amani Wilson.
And I'm Dr. Farzad Kamyar. On Empowered Voices, Recovery to Resiliency, we bring to light the challenges and triumphs of families navigating substance use during and after pregnancy.
Through compelling stories, expert insights, and actionable guidance, we aim to empower listeners with understanding, compassion, and tools for support.
Join our community where compassion replaces judgment.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, because every mother deserves support and the chance to thrive.
The first thing is, this whole process is built on soul connection first. Connect to your soul first. That beautiful statue beneath what's happened. That's the first thing. And it's very simple to do that, to connect. You just turn your mind off, turn your attention inward, and get quiet. And then start to slowly speak and just say, soul, are you there? Let me know if you're there. the soul is never not there, but you just have a
Exactly.
dialogue like this, and then you turn your head off, and then you just let the words, you feel the words, you don't hear them, you feel the words rise up. And here's the way to tell: you'll feel the words rise up from below your neck. You won't feel them, you won't hear them in between your ears. Like soul words come up from below your neck, and they're a felt sense, and there's a lot of like felt loving weight to them. For example, if someone's gone through some traumatic experiences, and then the first thing to do, and they think like, this is just who I am, this is what's happened, I'm irredeemable, I'm useless, I'm broken, I'm this, I'm that, I'm unlovable, that's it. The only way is to potentially just think about ending everything. Just get quiet and turn inwards and just say, right, my soul, I don't know what else to do. This is what it feels like. Is that actually true? And then get quiet, and usually what will rise up is this felt sense of no.
Okay.
And it will feel so loving and so freeing. It should be like, and it will be like a dam opening up and a river of love start flowing. But like any relationship, you need to nurture it just the way you grow a plant. Not too much water and not too little. And just like any relationship, you don't want to, you don't just slam someone, but not too much, not too little. And the soul is always there, and it's never not been there, but it's not going to fight for your attention. It's not going to try and scream and get your attention. It doesn't need to. It doesn't exist in linear time, and it doesn't die. As physics tells us, energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transformed. And as the great wisdom traditions of India have taught us, and like the traditions of Ramana Maharshi, etc., and like the great texts, we are a little bit more than just a body.
Yeah.
So, but this whole process that I just explained is definitely a harmony of East and West together. Like the incredible and just precious contributions from 20th century psychotherapy and psychoanalysis from Freud and Carl Jung, etc., like Rudolf Steiner's work, etc., and just general like behavioral psychologists and developmental psychologists and all of that work, but harmonized and integrated with the wisdom traditions of the East. And this is also what Paul Chek is so much a pillar for, because he's one of the godfathers of holistic health and one of the pioneers of bridging the wisdom traditions of the East and the West together in holistic harmony. Like people from my generation of coaches that think in a holistic way, like our work is built on the shoulders of his contribution, along with people like Ken Wilber, etc., and a lot of others. But and like me as well, like just being half Indian and half English too. Like I've got East and West like running down the center of my entire being. Like growing up with an Indian grandma doing Reiki when my hand was hurting, and talking about yogic breathing, and growing up hearing about Shiva, but also hearing about Christianity and etc. Having both of those together, like that soul connection is the foundation, and that soul connection is that aspect is that core of the East, and then integrating it into samsara through that contribution from the West as well, which is inclusive of the nervous system and our nutrition and cellular function, etc., which obviously India has so much of with Ayurveda and breathwork and all the rest of it. So I'm not saying it's just the meditative traditions, of course, but there are certain like psychodynamic and psychotherapeutic contributions and developmental contributions from Western traditions, which just make what the East have even more whole and better as well. So we need to bring it all together not for the sake of saying one's better than the other, but for the sake of helping people as fast as possible and in as much of a lasting way as possible. So that would be that's the foundational piece of advice: connect to your soul.
Amazing.
And that's the first bit, and then just expand from there, and then get support if you really need to. Either start with like a free thing, just start researching yourself, or if you feel like you really need some support, then get support from someone like myself or another practitioner, etc. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Got it. And if listeners wants to connect with you, how they can connect?
Well, the best thing to do would be start at my website, which is jacobmodak.com. JacobModak.com. All the information about my coaching programs are on there. So I've got 3 different options for the program, which is all based around the exact same curriculum. Just the self-study version, which is the most sort of accessible one in terms of finances, time, schedule, etc., because it's just purely self-study. That's the most accessible end of the spectrum to start with. And then I have my group program, which is the self-study program, just a weekly group call where people can ask questions. And then I've got my private one-to-one mentorship, which is same structure, but instead of a group call and the self-study course, it's a private call with me per week. And that one's like for the people that want to go really, really deep. Specifically, if they want to really kind of go through this process, but then be like a change maker as well. Like regardless of what they want to do, they know that what they will be doing will be really informed by their healing journey, and they really want to share the lessons in some way. And so they really want to dive in and kind of go into a similar depth to me. Not saying they want to be coaches or anything like that. Like, it's not for me to decide what someone wants to be. It's just the level of depth that they want to go to. So that's why I have that available. It's not saying one's better than the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have those 3 different options so that wherever someone's at, there's a place for them to really start working through this stuff in a really lasting way. So maybe willingness is there, time is there, etc., but maybe financially they just can't. It's just not aligned yet to go for the group program or the mentorship. But £59.99 British pounds per month, cancel any time for the self-study, that's really manageable. And they can really dive in and get really stuck into that. And then maybe the group program's right for someone else because it's kind of in the middle. And then for someone who's kind of at a point where they can dive in even more, then maybe the mentorship's the right thing for them. And I also have my YouTube channel too, which is where my free stuff is, which is Jacob Modak Coaching. And I've got lots of plans to add to that a lot. So it's still fairly basic at the moment, but there are 2 videos on there particularly already, which are in-depth session recordings from coaching sessions I've done. One is 4 hours long and another one's 3 hours. I did those with 2 amazing women back in 2024 who gave me permission to share the videos publicly. And they're full-on coaching sessions, in depth, and both of them together, that's like 7 hours worth of coaching material on the YouTube channel, completely free. People can watch them, get lots out of that. So even if people don't want to dive into the programs just yet, they could start there and still be getting a lot of really good stuff. And then my Instagram is Jacob Modak, and all the links to that social media stuff's on my website anyway.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links, details, everything into the show notes for easy reference. And I'll just say, healing is not just about becoming someone new. It is all about kind of remembering who you were before you learned to survive, right? So,
it's also
Jacob,
not the point.
Yeah.
Healing is not the point.
Correct.
It's the passageway to the point.
Yes.
And
exactly.
the point is to simply be able to just dance with life in joy regardless of what's happening.
Exactly.
Just how learning how to clean a house is not the point. It's the passageway to the point, which is to be able to just have fun in the house because it's clean.
Exactly.
So it's like that too. It's not the point. It's the passageway to the point.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much, Jacob, for sharing your perspectives and the knowledge. It's really, really helpful. And thank you everyone for being here today. And I think sometimes the most important conversations are the ones that don't just promise you an kind of arrival point. They just it happens. And from today's discussion, if something just landed, then just be with it and notice where it touches something in you. The noticing that willingness to see what's been hidden in the plain sight. I mean, that's not preparation for the work. That is the work, right? So thank you so much for everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And with this is your host, Avik, and this is Mind Meets Machine. I'll just say, take care of yourself out there, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.